Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. Story number 1. I was walking my dog tonight because he was in my room a lot of the day while I caught up on homework. Halfway through my walk, I decided to go another way because I was holding a bag of dog shit and knew where trash would be. Let me note, I live in a slightly okay part of a pretty bad neighborhood, but I'm fairly strong, and not to mention my crazy German Shepherd, Caesar. Let me say, Caesar hates strangers right now, but usually doesn't bark or anything while walking next to people. Anyway, as we continued down the sidewalk and down the bend, I notice a man, and immediately my dog stares at him. So do I. There was just something wrong. He was walking the same direction, but as I turned down the street, he turned around in such a creepy manner. It was kind of like the old lady in the It Chapter 2 film, where the old lady is first seen as It and turns around. He started walking towards me but was still far away. But then he was taking very strange, accentuated steps, unusually long ones at that. When I got close enough, I saw his creepy dead eyes and smile. His skin was dark and smooth, and he stared at me so creepily. I still said, "What's up, man?" and got no reply. Maybe he hadn't heard me. The closer I got, I wondered why he was walking so strange beforehand. Didn't even seem possible to do so consistently. He looked sober and blank, but was walking normal but fast now. We were getting closer, and he started with those steps again. My dog snarled and lunged at him, biting at the air. The man didn't fucking flinch. Kept walking with those steps. Now I rarely get scared of strangers, with or without my dog. I've dealt with very mentally unsound people, drug traffickers, very scary people. I'm good at fighting, and seldom do I get scared of strangers. But I got the damn chills and was so creeped out. I don't want to say it was a demon or whatever, but I just don't know. I saw a bat a few minutes later, and yesterday, I woke up seeing a tall shadow at the foot of my bed. I don't think these things are related, or I hope not, but I'm completely freaked out. I'm a strong skeptic and haven't experienced anything paranormal in a long time. Any guesses or help? The way he turned around and the way he walked and looked at me. Also, my dog was going for his throat. Story number 2. When I was around 6 years old, my brother and I went to this creepy daycare center in a huge old Victorian home. This was during the late 1980s, when stories of child abduction and satanic cults were pretty rampant in the culture, as well as the news. We went to kindergarten half days. Our mother would drop us off and we'd get to the bus to and from school. Our mother would pick us up after she got off work at the local hospital. There was a large playground out back that was fenced off. After getting out of school, the kids from the center would play out back. At some point, this strange guy, maybe around 20, started coming around and talking to the kids through the fence. He acted weird and spoke in a funny voice. We weren't sure if he was developmentally delayed or pretending to be. He would flash his privates at some of the kids and ask them to flash back. Luckily, I only saw this once and noped the hell out of there. He creeped most of us out, and I know we tried to stay away from him. For whatever reason, the ladies that worked at the daycare center never seemed to be around when this man would show up, or believe us when we explained it to them. One day after getting off the school bus, myself and another kid took a shortcut from the bus stop to the daycare, basically just cutting between some small bushes on the side of the building. My brother was in the front, I was in the middle, and the third kid was behind us. Then we heard it, a rustling in the bushes and a loud shouting. "I'm gonna get you." Whipping around, I saw the creepy guy standing behind us. He started laughing hysterically and grabbed the kid behind us, who immediately started screaming and kicking at him. My brother and I turned around and grabbed our friend by the arms and started pulling him away, sort of playing tug-of-war with this kid. All the while, the guy is slobbering and talking about things he wants to do to us. We must have made a racket because eventually the guy let go and took off. We ran inside crying and tried to explain to the daycare ladies, who were just angry at us, said we were lying or that the guy was only joking. I remember our mother being very mad and yelling at us for taking shortcuts. I don't really remember anything after that, and I don't think anyone called the police or we ever saw him again. Story number 3. When I was in college, I'd always park in this one parking deck. Every morning I'd get there just in time to get one of the last spots on the top deck. It's on the edge of campus, but still a very busy area during the day. Even at late hours of the night, there'd still be a few cars around. There was one day I decided to stay on campus late to study, and I left the library sometime around 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. It's about a 15-minute walk through the most heavily trafficked part of campus to get back to my car. So of course, this was the first night I walked the entire route without seeing a single person, not even by the dorms. I got to the deck and noticed that there were no cars, not even one on the first floor. I pressed the elevator button and waited. A few seconds later, a car came into the deck, and I could see this man behind the wheel. He looked at me, swerved around to park on the first floor, but kept the lights and engine on. I thought nothing of it because music majors frequent this parking deck and often come to campus to practice at odd hours. Right as I got into the elevator, though, I saw through the closing doors that he was starting to drive up through the deck. I got up to the top deck and no other car was up there, except for mine on the opposite side from the elevators. I had to walk slowly to my car because it had snowed recently, and there were still patches of ice on the deck. Right as I got to my car and opened the passenger door to throw my bag in, I see lights coming up from the floor below, and the same car was coming up onto the top deck. The guy's face just looks emotionless. I couldn't get around in my car to the driver's seat without getting close enough to his car, but right as he passed me, he slowed down and watched me. Suddenly he hits the gas and whips around the loop of the deck and speeds towards me. I ran around and got into the driver's seat and watched him in my mirrors. He slowed down again, coming behind me, and then sped off back down the deck. I never saw him again. Story number 4. This happened to me when I was a child, and I still remember it very clearly to this day, as it set me up for a lifelong fear of being watched as I sleep. I was 6 years old and me and my family were living in public housing as we had recently come to America. Our apartment was on the first floor, but slightly underground, as my bedroom window was level with the ground outside. The windows were big and had a ledge. On my ledge I had stuffed animals lined up looking out the window. On this specific night, I was having trouble sleeping as there were strange noises coming from my outside window, along with tapping. I looked out my window and saw a strange man crouching and peeping through the gap between my curtains and the wall, looking directly at me with a strange look on his face. I started screaming and crying. My dad ran into my room to assure me that everything was all right, and I was just having a bad dream. But I hadn't been sleeping. I couldn't sleep that night because I was having a weird feeling the entire night of being watched. My dad opened the curtains and no one was there. To comfort me, he slept in bed with me, but I still couldn't sleep. He, on the other hand, had knocked out. It was getting later in the night, and the weird noises started up again. It sounded like someone trying to cut through the screen and tapping on the window with the blade as he cut through with the motion. I woke my dad up quietly, trying to show him what I had told him about. He ripped open the curtains and saw the man with a knife cutting through the screen. He jumped out of bed and ran for the door, and then ran to chase the man who was watching me sleep, trying to break into our home. He chased the man to his car, but he sped off before my father had a chance. My parents called the police and told them what happened, but nothing ever really came of it. From that night on, I've had an irrational fear and never sleep by a window. I used to have night terrors about the incident for years. I haven't thought about this for a while, but I had another dream about it recently, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I asked my dad about it recently, and he refused to talk about it with me. So strange man trying to break into my room. Let's not meet, and I hope I never met you before. Story number 5. In the evenings, my friend and I, who are both adults, like to take a walk in the park in the evenings for a bit of a workout. Usually it's a fairly safe environment. We see the regulars walking and there's people bringing their kids to play. But after 8 p.m. it starts to become empty. Today it was around 8:45 or 9 p.m. We notice the parking lot is completely empty, save for a white van driving around. But we have to cross the lot to get where we're going. We note it as being a bit strange but keep walking. As soon as it sees us, it literally turns around towards us and starts to follow us. Initially the van was about 15 feet away, but it keeps speeding up until it's 5 to 10 feet behind us. I try to tell my friend we should try to get on the grass to where it can't drive on, but she insists we just keep walking as fast as we can and get out of there. I don't want to leave her either, so I just listen and try walking as fast as I can with her. As we keep walking, the van gradually gets faster. At this point, we're sure it's following us and not just trying to exit the parking lot. It stopped at the exit and flat out pulled into the parking spot next to us so it could turn to properly keep following us. At this point, it's 2 feet away from us, and we're trying to get away from it. Just as the van is right up to us, the van stops. I'm a bit confused, but I keep walking. Till 5 seconds later, the park ranger pulls into the lot to patrol the park. When I look back, I can see the van speeding off in the opposite direction, going around to the other end of the park to exit. We decided it was time to go home after that. Story number 6. This happened when I was 4 years old. My memory of the events are quite vivid, as this was the closest thing I've ever been to possibly dying. I was at the grocery store with my mom. While she was buying groceries, she left me outside to play on those pretend cars that you put a quarter in so it moves back and forward. We lived in a small town, so there was a feeling of trust in the community, and my mom felt safe leaving me out there by myself. 4-year-old me was having the time of her life on that car. I didn't even take notice of the man standing nearby. A skinny and rather short man. He was sporting a trench coat that nearly touched his feet. He looked like he was in his mid-30s and was already starting to bald. Once the car ride stopped, the man walked up to me. I remember him kneeling down to me, letting out a wide grin and asking, "Hey, would you like another quarter, little lady?" "Sure, mister," I said. He smiled and placed a quarter in my hand. He held on to my hand for quite a while. I put the quarter back in the machine and went for another ride. He was watching me the entire time. Mom was taking a little longer than expected. The car ride was over again, so the man picked me up from the ride and stood me in front of him. He said, "I have a car myself. Do you want to come for a ride with me?" I remember being a little confused by the question. It's like I was starting to notice something was a little off. "Don't worry," he assured me. "This ride is free of charge." He grinned again. He held out his hand and I stupidly accepted it. We started walking towards his car. It was this small dented thing that hadn't been cleaned in years. When he opened his car door, it was accompanied by a high-pitched yell from behind me. My mom, along with a large security guard, were sprinting towards me. The man panicked, jumped in his car and drove off immediately. I was left in the parking space by myself. My mom grabbed me and hugged me. I could feel her tears running down my shoulder. I heard the security guard on his walkie-talkie requesting assistance. Unfortunately, they never found the man. Thinking back to that day 20 years ago really puts this thing into perspective. I was possibly 10 seconds away from being taken forever, never to see my mom again. The fact that this man might still be roaming the streets absolutely terrifies me. I hope no one else has gotten hurt because of him. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for more videos. Be sure to email me your true scary Halloween stories so I can feature them on the Halloween special next month. Email your stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I'll leave my email address as well in the description box below. Until we meet again, stay sinful.
Ever since the age of 13, I've always seen, heard, and felt things that are unexplainable more times than I can count. I have a family history of mental illness that could be the reason as to why I had these experiences, so when stuff like this did happen, even though I was terrified, I would brush them off as just hallucinations. I am on medicine now that is really helping me, and when I do have hallucinations, they are far and few between. However, with all this said, this time in particular has me totally confused and thoroughly creeped out. So I was 17 at the time. My family and I had just gotten back from vacation really late, and we had all agreed that a shower before going to bed would be really nice. My family is really big. There are 12 in my family, and 8 of us were living in the house. I said that I would take the last shower because I wanted to sit outside and get some time alone anyway. The only light source was one of those street lamps to light our driveway. Our house was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It had been about maybe 15 minutes, and as time passed on, an uneasy feeling started to creep into my stomach. I felt like it would probably be a good idea to go inside at this point, but when I heard coyotes yipping and howling somewhere out in the field, I decided to stay outside for a little longer and listen to them. That was when pure fear consumed everything in my body, though. Not even controlling my own body, I slowly looked over to the road, and that's when I saw what I can only describe as a 10-foot tall figure with elongated arms and legs and giant red eyes gliding down the road, about as fast as a slow-moving car. This thing was really, really thin, was standing completely straight up, and was hovering about 1 to 2 feet above the road. I watched in horror as the thing passed by our house without even a sound. The whole time, I couldn't move. A couple of minutes later, I finally regained control of my body, and I ran inside. I didn't tell anyone about it other than my doctor because, to be honest, I just thought it was just another hallucination. Anyway, a year later, I moved in with my sister and brother-in-law, and while my brother-in-law and I were on a bike ride at about 11:30 at night, talking about creepy experiences that we've had, I started telling him about the Coyote Man, as that was the name that I'd given to him. As I was explaining the features of the thing, his face grew more and more confused as I continued to talk. Just as I was going to talk about the big red eyes that the thing had, his face lit up. I asked him why he was making the face that he was, and then he lifted his hands up to his eyes, making large circles with both of them. I started getting creeped out, and that's when he was like, "Big red eyes?" I immediately started getting chills. You see, he started to explain that when he was 19, he saw the exact same thing, and right before he saw it, he heard coyotes yipping and howling as well. I was freaking out at this point because I never told anyone about it, other than my doctor, and I thought that I was just seeing things. He continued to tell me, though, that the thing actually chased him, and he said that he was absolutely terrified and that it was the fastest that he'd ever run in his whole life. He said that the only way to lose this thing in the end was to climb to the top of a silo. He said that he was up there for pretty much the rest of the night, just waiting for this thing to show up again, but it never did. I got chills for minutes on end when he told me that. I have no idea what that thing was, as I've never heard of anything like it since. Every time that I think about that experience, though, I get super creeped out. Like I said, for the longest time, I just thought it was just another hallucination, but hearing that story from my brother, it makes me think twice about it. If anyone has any info, input, or ideas, it would be much appreciated. So I moved in with my boyfriend into his house back in November of 2021. It's an old trailer, and I knew from moving in here that there was something, but didn't feel like it was harmful in any way, and at first it didn't even seem like it wanted to make itself present. I have a pretty good knack for feeling out things like this, as I've dealt with what I could say paranormal stuff, or at least things that just make absolutely no sense my entire life. Anyways, I've had the usual things, like things not being in places where I left them, knocking, cabinet doors, sort of being open and shut that I know that I didn't open or shut, shadows, and just lots of stuff that could maybe be explained away, but there's a few things that I just cannot get over. The first being something that happened a few months back. My boyfriend and I were in our bedroom about to go to sleep. I had left the room to go into the kitchen to get some water. From our kitchen, you can see our hallway that our bedroom is at the end of. While I was in the kitchen, I saw my boyfriend peering around the corner of the doorframe of the bedroom looking at me. I figured that he was messing with me or something, but when I came back to the room, he was in the bed under the covers. And when I asked him why he was looking around the corner at me, he had no idea what I was talking about. Mind you, my boyfriend is not the sort of person to do this. Anyway, flash forward to yesterday. I had gone out in the morning to get some coffee and do some laundry. When I came back, all of the shoes from our shoe rack were on the floor, but they didn't look like they were knocked off. They looked more like they had all been sort of taken off and placed on the floor. I at first blamed it on our dogs, but one of our dogs is crate trained, and when I went into the living room where his crate is, his crate had been moved across the room and into the kitchen. He's never moved his crate before on his own, and I'm really not sure how that's even possible for him. Not to mention my dogs were losing their absolute minds when I returned. Now, I wouldn't have been so bothered by this if it wasn't for the fact that when we were going to bed last night and I walked into the bedroom, I saw my boyfriend peering at me from inside the closet. Only thing is, my boyfriend was right behind me coming into the room with me. I want to play it off as I'm just seeing things, but it just doesn't feel right to me at all. I plan on smudging the house this weekend, and as I've said, I've dealt with a lot of things in the past, but nothing like this. I guess that I'm just asking if anyone has dealt with anything similar, or could offer any advice in this situation. So last year, June 28th, 2021, my friend D, my other friend Jay, and I all went on a camping trip. It was deep in the woods in Alberta, Canada. Now, the trip was going good. It was in the middle of nowhere. No cell service, no bars, nothing. Just the way that we liked it. But we painted, listened to music, and all that jazz. And one day, D and Jay were both sleeping in the tent. It was around 2 p.m. And I was sitting alone outside, when I start hearing this screaming, John, help me! John, where are you?" And it repeated 4 times, the same way, same spacing. Now, I'm not going to go and die in the woods, so I didn't check it out, obviously. I stayed where I sat. And when the other 2 got up, I explained what I heard. Me and Dee went to the river that was close by, leaving Jay alone at the tent. We came back maybe 40 minutes later, and Jay is terrified. He explained that he heard the exact same thing as me, including how the pauses were. I explained the pauses when I told them both about the screaming. A few months later, me and Jay went back there, but only the two of us. On the last day, me and Jay had this gut feeling that we were about to die if we stayed the last night. I'm certainly one to trust my gut feelings, and this was one of those gut feelings that you do trust. And I know it wasn't anxiety. This feeling was literal terror. And so, we're going back there with Dee in a few days to try and figure out what the heck is going on in this place. So I suffered a great amount of trauma as a kid, and because of this, I can't really remember a significant amount of my life, up to about 12 years old. Recently, however, chunks of memories have been coming back to me vividly, and honestly, I wish that they wouldn't. In any case, I remembered recently an incident during which my uncle, now deceased, took my cousin, around 10 at the time I would guess, and I, at about 6 or 7, for a walk at the local park. The park was a playing field where you can play football and stuff, so the grassy area is sort of towards the middle, and the walking or cycling path surrounds it. My cousin and uncle were talking and walking really slowly, and it was really annoying me, so I walked ahead at my usual pace. That put a good bit of distance between us, and as I walked, I approached a little shack, strung together out of a few sheets of galvanized and a garden gate for a door. Because of the ineffectiveness of the door, you could see inside the building, and there was a mattress and some sheets and scattered belongings. As I walked by, I heard someone whistle to me. I stopped and looked around and saw who was calling me. A skinny, dark-skinned man with matted hair and tattered clothing, smoking while sitting near the back of the shack. The man sort of kept talking to me once he'd figured that I'd spotted him, trying to tell me to come inside his house, that he has something for me, to come and play with him for a while, things like that. I didn't go, not because I knew what he intended to do or anything, but because my parents had always taught me to not talk to strangers. And he was really scary looking too, so that didn't help his cause. I walked away and I heard him start cussing and stomping out of the house. He didn't get the chance to follow me, however, because my uncle and cousin had also arrived near the spot. And I think he knew that he obviously couldn't do anything with witnesses around, especially a man who was twice his size and who would probably kick his butt. I went home that day and I honestly just forgot about it. I'm 21 years old now, and I'm only now suddenly remembering it happened. But I understand what he intended to do to me fully now. It only all clicked into place when my mother told me a few days ago that the vagrant who had been living by the school, there was a primary school opposite the park, had passed away, and that she was happy that she did because he apparently had actually sexually assaulted a bunch of little girls. Back in the day, apparently. I basically interrogated her to make sure that it was the same person, and it turned out that, yep, it was. It still makes my skin crawl whenever I think about it, that I could have been his victim. How badly things could have gone if my uncle was just a few meters further back. It's crazy and sickening to think about, and makes me even more scared to leave my house, to be honest. Like I said, I wish that I never remembered. I'm still haunted by old memories of an ex-boyfriend that I dated for only a few months. We met online and lived an hour apart, but we clicked really fast and started seeing each other regularly. Things were going great for about a month, and then one day we stopped at my place so I could pack some clothes to go stay at his place for the weekend. We walked into my bedroom, and as I started packing my belongings, I noticed him scanning around my room with his eyes. I didn't think too much of it, but after a few awkward moments of silence, he began to ask me some very specific and eerily detailed questions. So, do you ever move your pillow to the foot of your bed at night and pull your blinds all the way up so you can see the stars out of this window over here before you go to sleep? I bet you use this lamp over here the most. It's the only one that I'd use. I was frozen in shock. I just stood there speechless, looking at him in disbelief. He had just described everything, and I mean everything, that I did the night before, and it was the only time that I'd ever rolled up my blinds at night and laid at the opposite end of the bed to look up at the stars in the sky. And I told nobody about that. So how the heck did he know? The only thing that I could do next was just sort of laugh it off and ask him how he knew, but he just kind of shrugged it off and changed the subject. I couldn't stop thinking about it the whole weekend though, wondering if he'd been watching me. I hid my paranoia as best as I could until I got home, but I then did a bit of a deep sweep of my entire bedroom, looking for any sign of hidden cameras. I found nothing. I didn't have any laptops, computers, TVs, or security cameras in my bedroom that he could have hacked to spy on me with. I did have my mobile phone in my room, I guess, but it was laying flat on my nightstand that night. If he was physically stalking me, it would have been difficult for him to see me into my bedroom, as my room was up pretty high. He would have had to have watched further away from the forest too, and even if that was the case, there were some large trees in my backyard that would have blocked his view. It just didn't make much sense, and it still doesn't make any sense. I've tried to pass this off as a coincidence, but when I step back and look at the whole picture, there was something just not right about this guy. I vividly recall the first time that I ever spoke to him on the phone before we met. We had so much in common, almost too much in common. From books that we were reading to very specific interests, hobbies and habits. I thought that I'd met my soulmate. Nobody has ever made me feel so alive, and he swept me off my feet, only to drop me from what I thought was heaven. He became a different person, seemingly overnight. He was a narcissist, and I watched his mask fall off. We had texted on and off for a few years after, but I've since gone no contact. I guess I will probably never know the hows and the whys, but I continue to wonder, and also look over my shoulder. This is something that happened to me almost a year ago. I was 17 at the time, and I was not prepared for the terrifying encounter that I would soon be a part of. A few years ago, me and my family moved from our neighborhood home to a farmhouse in the middle of hayfields and woods to take care of my now past great-grandfather who lived there. Since I was such an imaginative kid and loved being outside, I would spend all day out in the fields and the woods, every single day. And I've still done it for all the years that I've lived here. To give you an idea of the layout of this farmland as well, our house is in the front hayfield, then there are two more behind it with a creek running through, and finally a couple of miles of woods behind all of that. Keep in mind that these fields are absolutely huge, like it's just hundreds-ish of acres. Anyway, it was evening, and I went out to the backfield to watch the sunset, as I usually did. The view was best from there, and the sunset always looked cool over the trees. I took the 15-ish minute walk on the gravel road that connects all of our land, through the gates, over the creek, past the pond, and finally onto the backfield. I watched it set over the trees until I couldn't get a view of it anymore. It was starting to get dark, so I decided to go back home. That was until I saw something. You see, at the other side of the field, right across from me, I saw what looked like a buck staring right at me. And while it's not completely abnormal to see a deer out there, it is odd that it didn't get spooked by me being out there. Since my mum hunts in these woods, I got my phone out to take a picture of it to show her. But the sun had basically set, so all you could see in the picture was like a bit of a silhouette. But that's when it started getting weird. I looked up from the picture and saw the silhouette change. It got taller, like the deer stood up onto its back legs or something, and just stood there, motionless for way too long. Feeling uneasy now, but trying not to get scared, I casually put my phone back into my pocket and started walking home. It was getting quite dark after all, and it's just a wild deer, nothing to be scared of, right? So I turned my back to the deer and I began walking. but something just felt really wrong. It's like I could feel someone staring at me, or something. So I quickly look over my shoulder, but see nothing. It was very dark now, so all I would be able to see is shadow anyway, and I didn't really see anything. Until I saw it again, but it was just wrong. Just sharing this as well makes me feel uneasy, but it was still standing upright, just like it was before I started walking home, but now it was running straight towards me. And that's when I knew that something was completely wrong. This isn't normal. So I take off through the first gate and get onto the gravel road, screaming for somebody to help me. My bare feet are getting torn up by the sharp rocks that I'm running over. Fumbling with my phone as I ran, I called my dad, who was thankfully home. I screamed at him that somebody was chasing me. And when I look back, the deer is now gaining, about half the distance away it was when I first saw it running. I can hear my dad on the other end of the phone slamming the front door open and running outside, but I can't hear or see the thing behind me anymore. It's completely dark out now, and all I see is a shadow of something getting 50, 40, 30 feet away. I tear through the creek bed as I run through it, finally seeing my house lights in the distance. I scream as loud as I've screamed in my entire life, the breath scratching my lungs as I do so. I'm running uphill now, not stopping once this entire time, and I finally see my dad in front of me running even faster than I am. He jumps the last gate, separating me from my house, and starts yelling, "Get away." When he finally reaches me, instead of stopping at me, he keeps running past me and keeps yelling. I fall to the ground, barely able to catch my breath, tears streaming down my face. After about 20 seconds, my dad kneels next to me. "Did you see it?" I force out of my trembling lungs. "Son, I don't see anything." Apparently, whatever chased me was afraid of my dad because once he was in view, it must have run away. Now, it's been a year since that happened. I've been made fun of by most people because everyone thinks that it was just a sickly deer with rabies or something. Even my parents do, I guess, but my great uncle, who is literally an expert on wildlife, says that there's just no way that that could have happened. He says that it was most likely a bear, but a bear hasn't been seen here for like 30 plus years, so that seems extremely unlikely. Plus, I don't think bears have antlers, which is something that I distinctly recognized in the shadow that was chasing me. In the late fall of 2019, my mum decided to leave our narcissistic and emotionally abusive stepfather. She, my younger brother, and I packed our stuff up into a U-Haul and took it all to a new apartment that we'd be living in. It was like a breath of fresh air getting out of that house and into a place away from that man. For the first couple of months, everything was going normally. My mum would go to work, my brother would go to school, and I went to an alternative school that only required me to go like 2 days a week. This meant that I got a lot of time home alone, something that I'd eventually come to hate. So it started off small. One day I heard the front door open. It was about the time my mum and our brother got home, so I went downstairs to see who it was. The door was wide open, and nobody was home though. I checked the parking lot, and my mum's car wasn't there. My brother was nowhere to be found either, and so I closed the door, went back upstairs after making sure nothing was missing, and that was it. The most common occurrence when I was home alone were the footsteps though. If I was upstairs, I would hear someone walking around downstairs. If I was downstairs, I'd hear someone walking around upstairs in my room. It was almost like a daily thing, so eventually I just stopped trying to investigate, and only once did the footsteps come into the same room as me. My bed was against a wall, and I was laying face down facing that wall, just scrolling on my phone. It was around 3:50 p.m, and I'd heard footsteps on the stairs. It was about the time that my brother got home every day from school, so I didn't think too much of it. The steps came into our room, we had to share one, and stopped right next to my bed. so I rolled over to see what he wanted. But when I did, there was no one there. A few minutes after that, I heard my brother open and close the front door and start up the stairs, and it couldn't have been him the first time because there's just no way that he would have been that quick. But the worst thing that happened was on this one night. Everyone in the house was sleeping except for me, and as I was laying in my bed, my eyes were drawn to the far corner of my room, right next to my bedroom door. Now, I don't really know a good way to describe it other than saying that it was way too dark in that corner. Like there was just a black hole in the room or something. Every time I looked into that corner as well, I nearly had a panic attack, but I managed to pull my eyes away several times, only for them to be drawn back to the same spot. And there were voices too. They were all whispering indistinctly, but they sounded angry and hateful. It was the most terrifying night of my life, and I think the worst part is that nobody believed me. I got the classic response that it was just the house setting, that it was just the pipes. I guess it doesn't really matter anyways. Shortly after, my mum, brother and I left and moved into another house, not for the ghost-related reasons or anything. And I haven't had another experience since then, which I am very, very grateful for. So this is a story that took place in the late 70s or early 80s. So I was roughly 6 when this happened, I guess. My parents went on a weekend trip and returned to their home. It snowed while they were gone. This is important for later. And when they entered their home, they noticed things were tossed and moved about. It became clear to them that someone had invaded their house while they were gone. As they looked around, they began to notice that nothing was actually taken. My grandpa had a safe in the spare room, which they found opened. There was cash and jewelry nearby, but again, none of it was taken. They kept important documents in that safe, and they noticed that their marriage certificate was missing of all things. Still confused, my grandpa made his way to the back door, which was partially opened. He opened it, and when exiting, you step on a sort of back porch, which extends to a large open backyard, and he noticed prints in the snow immediately. It's as though they exited the back door and walked into the yard. He also noticed that the prints didn't appear human. They resembled hoof prints, but seemed human in size. They lived in Illinois, and they've only had small animals like maybe squirrels or deer and raccoons in the area, so definitely not animal prints. And he followed the tracks out to the backyard, where they completely stopped right in the middle. Their yard was fenced in, but the prints completely ended as if whatever this thing was just broke into their home, stole their marriage certificate, and completely disappeared while walking or flew away. Grandpa was always a no-nonsense World War II veteran. My grandma was the same, never the type of people to play pranks or even joke about anything. But to see them so baffled and scared was something that always stayed with me. We drove to their home later that day with my dad. They lived in a smaller, all-one-floor home. Dad took a ladder and went up to the roof to find some clues, but he found prints up there too. The marriage certificate? That was never found, but they eventually moved from the home. They lived in 4 other homes in that general area and experienced other things as well. In fact, it was sort of like it followed them. At one of their homes, they heard their doorbell ring at 3 a.m. They woke up and Grandma opened the door to see a black figure that appeared human but was completely see-through. She screamed and quickly shut the door. Grandpa quickly grabbed a fireplace poker and swung open the door, and this thing just totally disappeared. In the short amount of time that he opened the door too, this figure, if it was human, couldn't have gone too far. And there really was just nowhere for anyone to hide there, so that one really perplexed all of us. When my father grew up, he also experienced a lot of strange things, but I may share them another time, and this whole thing has just been a real mystery for our family for a long time, and if you've got any theories about what any of this could be, then I would love to hear it. So this morning, I just got out of class and was headed home. I saw a crippled old lady begging for help along the way and telling me that she needed to get into her apartment. I helped her and took an elevator and took her up to her door. And to my surprise, the door was wide open. When I just sort of edged my way inside, she asked if I could go to a nearby shop to buy her wine and some cigarettes. She then proceeded to give her credit card to me and keys and insisted on the fact that I should leave my bag in her house. I said no thank you, and even though the situation was really weird, it wasn't that actually scared me the most. It was the inside of the apartment. You see, there were no decorations, pictures, or anything. It was completely disgusting. There was some kind of chair with excrements on it, and the walls were filled with cracks. At that, I got scared and took the card and the keys, tried to act normal, and then I wanted to test to see if the card was actually real. I went to the store, and the woman said that the card, it was a fake. It was at this moment, too, that I decided to not go back to her house and gave the keys and the cards to the police. A friend of mine told me that she saw the exact same old lady saying the exact same things that she told me. And the scariest thing is that she saw a man bring her outside and immediately go straight back inside the apartment. The area where she's from is known for being dangerous. There was recently a shooting between drug dealers in daylight, for example. And while I can't be completely sure, I think I may have just nearly died or something. What do you guys think?